Class, good afternoon. Okay, so today in our chemistry, we are going to continue looking at the topic number 1, which is just, matter. All right. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to look at another important aspect of that particular topic, which is just changes in state of matter. Changes in state of matter. Now, before we can start looking at this lesson, let us remind each other of the things that were discussed in lesson 1 of topic 1. In that particular lesson, we discussed the fact that matter, comes in 3 states. There is the solid matter, liquid matter, and gaseous matter. Now, what you are going to understand in this particular topic or lesson is the fact that these forms of matter that we discussed in the first lesson do not stay the same. When conditions change, matter changes its state from one form to the other. Okay? Yeah. So you are going to discover that all forms of matter change in state when temperature, for example, changes. For example, when ice, which is just solid water, is heated, it changes its state from solid to liquid. So here, matter has changed from the solid that it was to liquid state. This occurrence here is an example of a change in state of matter. When matter is changing from one form to the other, we call this process the change in state of matter. In this picture, you can see that we had ice that has changed its form from solid to liquid. We have solid water, which we call ice. It has changed its state to, liquid water here. So this is one example of a change in state of matter. Okay? Once this introduction has been understood, we can now look at these changes in state of matter, starting with the melting. Now, this melting is an important concept for you to understand when it comes to changes in state of matter. All right? Yeah. Now, what you must understand is, first of all, the definition of what melting is. So, by definition, melting is the change in state of matter from solid state to liquid state. So when matter is changing from solid to liquid, we call this process melting. Okay? As you can see in this particular picture, we've got ice cream, which is just solid matter. When you heat this ice cream, it will change from being a solid to being a liquid. This process here is what we call melting. All right? Now, the temperature at which a solid starts to melt is known as the melting point. So this melting point is simply the temperature at which solid matter starts to change to liquid matter. So as you are studying your chemistry today, these are the things that you must understand if you want to pass your examinations with a distinction. I hope this is clear enough for you to understand. So this is the first change in state of matter. Once this has been understood, we can look at the second, change in state of matter, which is just evaporation. Okay? By definition, evaporation is the change in state of matter from liquid to gas. When matter is changing its state from being a liquid to being a gas, we call that process evaporation or vaporization. Because other teachers say vaporization, I call it evaporation, but it means one and the same thing. For example, when you get your water, which is a liquid, and then you put it in a pot and then you heat it, you are going to see that the liquid water will start to change from the liquid that it was to a gas, which is just water vapor. This process here, where matter is changing from liquid to gas, is what we call evaporation. All right? Now, the temperature at which a liquid starts to evaporate, in other words, the temperature at which a liquid starts to change to become a gas, is what is known as the boiling point. So this boiling point is the temperature at which a liquid will start to change to become a gas. For example, the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius. So when you are heating water, immediately its temperature reaches 100 degrees Celsius, you are going to see that this water will start turning from liquid to become a gas. So as you are studying your chemistry, these are the things that you are required to understand. I hope this is clear enough for you to understand. Once this has been understood, we can now look at the third change in state of matter. This third change in state of matter is what we call condensation, to condense, condensation. Now, by definition, condensation is the change in state of matter from gas to liquid. So when matter is changing from the gas that it was becoming a liquid, we call that condensation. Okay? Now, the temperature at which a gas condenses is known as its dew point. So when you have a gas and then that gas changes from being a gas to being a liquid, what is happening there is that that particular gas is condensing. Now, the temperature at which that gas starts to become a liquid is what we call the dew point. The dew point. So you must understand this concept very, very clearly. Okay? Once you've understood this concept, we can now look at the fourth change in state of matter, which is just freezing. Freezing. By definition, freezing is the change in state of matter from liquid to solid. So when you see that a liquid starts to change to become a solid, what is happening there is what we call freezing. For example, when you get your water and put it in a cool place, such as a refrigerator, you will find that slowly but surely, that water will start to change its state from a liquid to solid. When that is happening, this process is what we call freezing. Okay? Some of you love to eat offals. Now, offals are made up of a lot of fat. So when you are cooking those offals, you will discover that in the pot, because it is hot, that fat is in liquid state. But immediately you get that soup in which that fat is contained, and then you put it on the plate, you are going to see that the soup that was in liquid form starts to change to harden. It starts to solidify. The process by which that soup of yours turns from being liquid to a solid fat is known as the freezing. It's the same thing when a candle is being burnt. When you are burning a candle, you are going to see that the wax will be in liquid form at the tip where the flame is found. But as soon as that, wax drips down and falls to the floor or to the ground, you will find that it will solidify. So the process of turning from a liquid to a solid is what we call freezing. Okay, so the temperature at which a liquid freezes is known as its freezing point. So the freezing point is just the temperature. I hope you are understanding. For example, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. Immediately the temperature reaches 0 degrees Celsius, the water that was a liquid will change its state to become a solid, at which point we call it ice. I hope this is simple and clear enough for you to understand. Once this has been understood, we must now go to the fifth, change in state of matter. This one is known as the sublimation, to sublime. Okay? Now, by definition, sublimation is the change in state of matter from solid to gas or from gas to solid directly without passing through the liquid state. Now, there are some substances here on earth that sublime. For example, when you get what we call dry ice and then you leave it there, you will see that it will change from being a solid directly to being a gas, or from being a gas directly to being a solid. There is no passing through the liquid state. When you see this happening, you must remember that sublimation is taking place. So sublimation happens when matter changes its state from solid to gas or from gas to solid directly without passing through the liquid state. I hope you are understanding. So, as you are studying for your chemistry or science exams, this is the foundation that you need to understand for you to pass your exams. So, these are the 5, changes in state of matter that you are supposed to understand. Now, in summary, this is what you are going to see. Here we have solid matter, liquid matter, and then gaseous matter. So we're going to start from point A. Now from point A, we are moving from solid changing to a liquid. Now we've just discussed the fact that when matter is changing from solid to become a liquid, we call this change in state of matter melting. So part A there is melting. Now, when you are moving from a liquid going to a gas, this change in state of matter here is what we call evaporation. Remember, I did tell you that when matter is changing its state from being a liquid to being a gas, we call this change in state of matter evaporation or vaporization. It's one and the same thing. Now, once we reach a gas, we'll start going back because here we were heating. When you heat a solid, it will melt to become a liquid. When you heat a liquid further, it will vaporize to become a gas. You cannot do anything more from a gas. So once you have a gas, you can now start to cool. Okay? So when matter is changing from being a gas to being a solid, we call this change in state of matter from gas to liquid condensation. So when you are moving from a gas going to a liquid, you are condensing. So condensation is taking place right there. Now, once you have your liquid back and then you cool it further, you are going to move from liquid going to a solid. Now, when matter changes state from liquid going to a solid, we call that freezing. We call that freezing. So part D is freezing, whereas part C is condensation. Okay, I hope this diagram summarizes what we've discussed so far. Now, we've got this change in state of matter where we are moving from a solid here directly to a gas, or from a gas directly to a solid. This change in state of matter is what we call sublimation. So this diagram here summarizes the discussion that we've just had. Lastly, you must understand two things. The first thing that you must understand in order for you to pass your chemistry exam is to understand the heating curve of matter. The heating curve of matter. Okay, so by definition, the heating curve shows a graph of what happens when matter is being heated. Now, as you are studying or as you are learning this, the most important thing that you must understand is learning how to interpret this graph right here. You must learn how to interpret this graph right here. So this y-axis or this vertical axis will always show temperature. This horizontal axis, also known as the x-axis, will show heat energy being absorbed. Now, the question is, how do you interpret this heating curve? So this is how you interpret it. The first slope here, the first line there, which is that slope, shows the point at which matter is a solid. So that sloping part there shows the point at which matter is a solid. Now, when you have this horizontal line here, this horizontal line indicates the point at which this solid is melting. Okay, so there we have melting. And then we have another slope right here. At that slope, we have a point during which matter is a liquid. So that slope is where matter is a liquid. So here, matter is a solid. There, matter is a liquid. Now, this horizontal line here shows the point at which, matter is changing its state from being a liquid to being a gas. Now, this point here is the point for evaporation, also known as boiling or vaporization. So during this, horizontal line here, this liquid is boiling so that it can change into a gas. At that particular point, this matter has changed to becoming a gas only. So here we have a gas only. So here we have a solid, liquid, and gas. Now, this is how you interpret the heating curve. To make you understand the heating curve even better, we must come here. So what you see is this. Our heating curve is like this. So here we have the x-axis, which shows heat, and there we have the y-axis, which just shows it changes in temperature. So we saw that our heating curve is like this. Okay, like that. Now, I did mention the fact that at this point, we only have solid matter. Okay, here we are melting. So from this point to that point, you are melting there. Yeah. Now, take note of this. The temperature at that point, the temperature at this point is what we call the melting point. So the temperature here is the melting point of this particular item. Let's say the temperature there is 10 degrees Celsius. We can conclude by looking at that line to know that the temperature at which this particular item of matter starts to melt is 10 degrees Celsius. So what you must remember is the fact that the temperature at that point is the melting point. Now, during this state of melting, here matter exists in two forms. At the point of melting, matter is both solid and liquid. Yeah, let me give you an example. When you get ice, remember ice is simply a solid water. When you get your ice and then you start to melt it, that ice does not just jump into becoming liquid water. What you're going to see during melting is the fact that in the container where there is that ice, you are going to have a block of ice and some liquid water. So what I'm trying to say is the fact that during melting, matter exists both as a solid and a liquid. Once you leave the melting, once all that matter has melted, you now go to becoming liquid. So this part here is where matter exists as a liquid only. Now, as you continue heating this liquid, you are going to reach that point here. Now, when you take that point to the temperature, axis here, you are going to have some temperature here. Now, this temperature here indicates the boiling point of that liquid. Now, let's say this boiling point is 100 degrees Celsius. You can conclude therefore that the point there is the boiling point. So the point here is the point during which this matter is boiling or evaporating, if you like. Remember, evaporation has got three names. You can call it boiling, you can call it vaporization, or you can call it evaporation. So here, from this point to that point, our liquid is, boiling. It's changing from being a liquid to being a gas. Now, during boiling, matter exists as a liquid and a gas at the same time. I'll give you an example. When you get your pot and then you put it on a cooker, for example, on your stove, you discover that as the water is boiling in the pot, that water is existing as a liquid and as a gas at the same time. So during boiling, matter exists as a liquid and as a gas. During melting, matter exists as a solid and as a liquid. Once all that liquid has boiled, it will now turn into a gas. like that. So during that particular spot, from this point to that point, matter exists as a gas. So the key points that you must understand here are the boiling point, which is the temperature at that spot, and the melting point, which is the temperature at that spot. I hope this is clear enough for you to understand. Once this has been understood, we can now understand the cooling curve. The cooling curve. Now, the cooling curve is simply the opposite of the heating curve. Now, in the cooling curve, this is what we have. The cooling curve shows what happens when matter is cooled. Remember, the heating curve simply shows what happens when matter has been heated. Now, this cooling curve is the opposite of the heating curve. It simply shows what happens when matter is cooled. So this is how you start it. You start from a gas. When a gas has been cooled, it condenses. So at this particular point, we have condensation taking place. And then when condensation has happened, this matter that was a gas will now turn completely into a liquid. So at this particular point, you have liquid matter. As you cool this liquid even further, this liquid will now freeze. It will be freezing at that particular point. Once this liquid has frozen, it will now become a solid right there. So here you have gaseous matter. Here you have got liquid matter. Here you have solid matter. This happens as you are removing heat from a particular form of matter. So you must learn how to interpret the cooling curve as well. So come with me so that we can understand the cooling curve even better. Now remember, the cooling curve looks like this. So we have the temperature axis and the energy axis. So we start with a gas there. This gas will condense to turn into a liquid. This liquid will be cooled further and it will freeze so that it turns into a solid. So from this point to that point, we have a gas. And then this gas will condense here. So here there will be condensation as you saw there. Now, at a point where this gas condenses, you have the temperature point there. This temperature point here is what we call the dew point. Remember, the dew point is simply the temperature at which a gas condenses, or the temperature at which the gas changes its state from being a gas to being a liquid. So that will be our dew point. Once this gas has condensed completely, it will now become a liquid. So in that state, we have a liquid from there to there. Now, as you cool this liquid further, you are going to have this temperature point right here. So this temperature point right here is what we call the freezing point. So this is the freezing point. So the temperature that you obtain here is the freezing point. The temperature point that you obtain here is the dew point. Okay, so from this point to that point, this liquid is freezing. So you have freezing right here. The liquid is freezing. Okay, once you cool this liquid further, it will now turn into a solid. So that slope shows a solid. So we are going to have a solid from this point to that point. So this is how you interpret the cooling curve. So I hope you've understood this lesson perfectly without any problems. Where you're not understanding clearly, watch this lesson over and over and over again until you get it. Where you're not understanding, pick up your phone call, give me a call so that we can discuss these things further one-on-one. The goal is for you to understand clearly until you are able to answer all the exam questions that the Examination Council of Zambia can present to you when it comes to this particular topic. For me to be convinced that you've understood better what I've taught in this particular lesson, I want you to try out this assignment. So we have got this assignment on changes in state of matter. Okay? Now, question 1 says, the diagram below shows the heating curve of matter. So this is your heating curve right here. Question A says, what state of matter exists between points A and B? So what state of matter exists between point A here and point B there? You must tell me what exists here. And then also, you must tell me what exists between point C and D. Point C and D is this point here and that point there. So you must tell me what exists here. And then you must also tell me what exists between point E and point F right there. So tell me, once you are done answering this question 1A, capture your answers, send to my WhatsApp for marking. I should be able to mark your work as soon as I receive it. Once you are done answering question A, answer question B as well on the same diagram. So question B says, what name is given to the temperature at point B? So what do we call this temperature that is straight with point B? Tell me what we call that temperature. Also, what name is given to the temperature at point D? I want you to tell me what we call this temperature at point D right there. And then the last question, question C says, between which point is matter existing in two states? Now, there are points here in which matter exists in two states. I want you to tell me those points where matter exists in two states. Once you are done answering these questions, get your smartphone, capture the answers, send to my WhatsApp. I should be able to mark your work as soon as I receive it. With this said, let me wish you a good day. I'll see you again later.